بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. نويت تعلم وتعليم وتذكر والتذكير ونفع إفادة استفادة، وحتى تمسك كتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم، ودعاء إلى الهدى ودلالة على الخير، ابتغاء وجه الله مرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. اللهم علمنا مما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما تعلمنا، وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, this finds you all well. Jazakallah khairan for being with us for another session of Living Islam. It's been 2 months since we've had a session of Living Islam. We were in the midst of Ramadan, so we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made that a blessed time for all of you, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your ibadah during that time and has allowed you to obtain the fruits of the fast of Ramadan, which is nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the whole purpose of the fast, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, in order that you may gain in taqwa. And so taqwa, one of the ways that you can look at it is nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that everything that would increase one in terms of their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is the goal of the fast of Ramadan. So we pray that we were able to accomplish that. Bi'idhnillah. Tayyib. So for those who may not be familiar with the Living Islam, I usually just try to give a brief introduction into the concept of living Islam for anyone who may be new to living Islam. Is that this is not a formal lecture. I don't have any type of prepared topic or speech or anything of that nature. This is purely open session. So this is kind of what we make of it. So as I always like to say, it's like, if we want to sit in each other's silent company for the next 2 hours, alhamdulillah. But this is an open conversation, and I always like to emphasize that it's not a Q&A. So it's not a situation where you just ask questions and I have to answer them. This is an open discussion. And so others can feel free to join within whatever conversation that we're discussing. And we usually like to say that, there's no topic that's necessarily off the table, but we also at the same time will ask that everyone make sure that whatever it is that they may be asking or discussing, that they still observe proper Islamic etiquette or adab. So with that little spiel, so to speak, I'm going to sit back and see where we end up tonight. Are we going to sit in each other's silent company or uh but actually let me correct that. There was a question that someone has sent in previously. So I guess I can start with that to kind of break the ice. And then I'll sit back and kind of see where the conversation leads. So there's a sister who essentially was asking, because she's a newcomer to Islam, she was asking about trying to find a wali, trying to find a guardian. In particular, this would more than likely be for the aspect of getting married. And the reason why I say it like that is because a wali is not necessarily just someone to help you get married, but generally speaking, oftentimes that is one of the primary um, functions that a sister would be actively looking for a wali for. And so my advice would be, because this particular sister was mentioning that she has a local masjid that she attends, but the sisters are completely separate from the brothers. The sisters have their own floor, so there really isn't any interaction between the sisters and the brothers. So my advice in that situation is that, generally speaking, in many masajids, and again, particularly because this sister is saying that she has a community that she goes to, is that generally speaking, the imam will oftentimes have office hours, um, or a way to get in contact with him. And so I would make my suggestion to start there, to let whether it be a sister who is familiar with the imam, or maybe be a relative of the imam, or maybe she has a relative who's close to the imam, someone who will be able to get the message across that you would like to speak with the imam, and then discuss with the imam the situation that you're interested in having a wali, and you're looking for help and assistance in that. It could be a situation where the imam himself may be willing to take on the responsibility of assuming the role of a wali, or it could be that the imam will be able to help and guide a sister to a brother who would be able to be in that position of being a wali as well. But usually, what I often say to sisters in regards to choosing wali when you're choosing one from someone that is not from your family is two things. One is whoever ultimately ends up going into that position with you, make sure that you have multiple meetings with this particular individual. Of course, making sure to have it be compliant by the Sharia, meaning that there should never be any time that the two of you are alone, and that it should be um, uh, a formal conversation. But the reason why I'm saying have multiple meetings with the imam or whoever it is that you may be having to be your wali is because you want this individual to get to know you better in terms of what it is that you'll be looking for in a husband. And so, trying to not necessarily just make it a generic thing. I'm just looking for a husband. And so, okay, well, here's the first single brother I see, you can marry him. But, really trying to pinpoint what it is that you'll be looking for in a husband. And then secondly, even though from the standpoint of the wali, that the wali has to be Muslim, um, it still does not negate the role that the males in your family can also play as well. So if your father is still in your life, then still having your father involved. If not your father, your brother, your uncle, whoever may be close to you in your own family is male, that they can also be a part of the process. They can't necessarily act as the wali, but at least there will be a male figure from your immediate family who will also be a part of the process as well. So those are the two pieces of advice that I usually give as well, in regards to, in particular, convert sisters, even possibly sisters who are born to Muslim parents, but for one reason or another do not have a wali to act on their behalf, and Allah knows best. Um, there's something put in the chat. I have so much animosity towards my ex-husband due to his character and behavior. It's to the point that I don't even like when he visits our kids. I have primary custody for fear that his habits will rub off on them. I know having hatred in one's heart towards anyone isn't good, but I feel like it's impossible. How do I rectify this? The ultimate answer is to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of changing hearts. And so that's the ultimate answer. But in terms of steps that one can take to try to remove it, is that, for one, is reflecting upon the aspect of having hatred in one's heart. Is it ultimately helping the situation? Meaning that, for example, uh, is it something that the person that we may hate even knows that we, have harbor this hate or this ill feeling towards them? And then even if they do know, again, the question becomes, is it something that is doing anything in regards to that individual at all? And so generally speaking, oftentimes the answer will be no. And so at the end of the day, if a person has wronged us, is that ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take care of the situation. But at the same time, we can ask ourselves a question, how many of us can say that we've never wronged Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the other question that we can ask is to say, how many of us can say that we don't wrong Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a regular basis, you know. And so the same way that we hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant us forgiveness and pardon us, that is the same type of forgiveness and mercy that we should do our best to try to show to other people, you know. And the thing is that it's not to say that because forgiveness does not necessarily mean forgetting. And so I can forgive someone, but I may not forget what it is that they've done, and that is a form of protection for myself to not be stung by the same stinger twice, so to speak. However, it's a situation where we just really want to come to the point of understanding that ultimately it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who placed us in the situation that we're in. And so really, is it really the person that's doing it, or is it ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's placed me in this situation? And he's seeing how I'm going to respond. And so, yes, there could be situations where um uh uh where a person, it almost seems like they're, you know, intentionally trying to harm us or intentionally trying to cause us pain or whatever the case may be. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's mentioned very clearly in the Quran, He says, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. That He is the one that created death and life in order to test you, which of you will be the best in works. And so again, the all of this is going to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that us as human beings, oftentimes we are veiled by what we perceive as the reality of the dunya. Whereas the reality of the dunya is that everything is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, meaning that everything that we perceive in the dunya is only through the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. So meaning again that ultimately it's not the creation that has placed us in this situation, but ultimately it's what? It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's placed us in this situation. And so when we have those situations coming about, asking ourselves, what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be most pleased with in this moment? Not worrying about what the person that we're interacting with is doing, saying, or whatever the case may be, but really just asking, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want me to respond in this situation? And trying to make that our focal point such that we don't even necessarily truly pay attention to the person, where our focal point is on Allah. Because we can't control the actions of other people anyway. Now, in relation to children, however, uh, it's a situation where if it's truly going to be a sense of harm, then we could make it a situation, for example, that the only interactions that will occur will be supervised interactions, because we still have a responsibility of trying to raise our children in the best of ways. So if a parent is not responsible such that they are going to expose children to things that are inappropriate, then we have a responsibility as being the other parent in the situation to try to take the best of means that we can in order to protect them from blameworthy character traits or habits or whatever the case may be. So it could be a situation where we try to have supervised situations, or if it's a situation where we can't necessarily fully do that, like for example, if it's a situation where the children necessarily have to go and be alone with the other parent, then it's a situation where we just have to provide um, extra care in order to make sure that our children understand and know that certain behavior is not appropriate. And so that comes to the situation of being very adamant in terms of ourselves having prophetic characteristics to the best of our capability, and teaching our children to be strong in their iman, teaching our children to be strong Muslims. And the only way that we can teach our children to be strong Muslims is we ourselves have to work on ourselves to become strong Muslims. Because reality of it is that even if it's not another parent, it's going to be the friends outside, the school that they go to, the television that they may come in contact with, the internet that they see on social media and so on and so forth. So the thing is that uh, you know, necessarily we're going to have situations where we have where we have negative influences that may influence our children. So we just have to be that much more vigilant in terms of trying to provide as much as possible the most Islamic environment that they can have so that they can uh they can be strong in their iman, you know. And so for example, this is why for example, one of our teachers, Sheikh Hamza Kamali, that he has the Why Islam is True course, for example. Um, uh, so that, you know, people can have a certainty within their iman, you know, that Islam is actually, you know, true to the point that we can prove it with actual evidence, so that when people go out into the world, they're not influenced by all of these different negative ideologies and theologies that are coming about in our times today. So, you know, when science tries to say that, you know, all religions are just nothing but blind faith and so on and so forth, we as Muslims, we could say, no, our religion is actually based on evidence. We don't believe what we believe just because we have blind faith in it, but no, we believe what we believe because it's actually true. You know, we can prove that it's true. So having a situation where we ourselves um, go about obtaining this firmness, and then extending that to pass it on to our children as well. And Allah knows best. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy. And the thing is that, you know, generally speaking, the people who are going to give us the most tests in our lives are those people who have been or are the closest to us. And so, you know, inshallah, we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy, inshallah. Like I said, I have nothing. So, Bismillah. I guess this is the time I can mention though. Inshallah, there'll probably be something sent out either in the emails or possibly the WhatsApp group for the Mecca Center. But um, some of you may have heard me mention, inshallah, in May, I will be doing a teaching cohort on why Islam is true, based upon my teacher, Sheikh Hamza Karamali's program. So I have about six more slots that are available. So if anyone is interested in taking that uh, cohort, you can let me know, inshallah. It'll be 8 weeks, and we ask that if you are interested, that you more or less feel that you can commit to the 8 weeks. It'll be 8 weeks on Sunday mornings, inshallah. And yeah, you can email me at my Mecca Center email. But if anyone is interested in that, then inshallah, they can, like I said, I have about six more slots uh, for that course, inshallah. Another question, how to handle my ex when he violates personal boundaries, um, and giving different examples of that. So this is something where this has to be, you know, made firm and clear. So I would say one of the things is that because it's a situation where there is no longer a marital situation, So this would be a situation where we that there's never a moment that the two of you are alone. So for example, if he's coming to pick up the children or something like that, he does not need to come into the house, especially if there's no one else in the home. So you can make that, perfectly clear. Also, letting him know that, this is something that is not permissible, meaning that, if he, is a person that has, iman, then, he should know that the relationship of ex-spouses is the same as other people who are not married. Is that proper Islamic etiquette has to be upheld. It doesn't matter that you previously had a relationship. Now that the relationship is no longer established, then there can no longer be any uh, inappropriate talking or behavior and so on and so forth. So, I mean, if you want to get technical, uh, outside of things directly concerning the children, there's not even necessarily a need for the two to talk um, uh, necessarily. So I would say that, this is one of those things where just, making it very clear that, this is a boundary that is not to be crossed. And if need be, to possibly get another male figure involved to, if that, if, directly telling him does not work. Yeah. If the thing is that that has no bearing on the sacred law, is that, just because he has some level of comfort previously or and so on and so forth, once a divorce is finalized, it goes completely back to the times when the two of you were not married. And so, all of that, uh, all of those things that were permissible while you were married are no longer permissible. And so this is something, and the thing is that you don't want it to be a situation where it kind of can build up because when people get comfortable, they it's very easy for things to increase. And so you want to do the best that you can to kind of nip it in the bud. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, when he talks about zina, he doesn't just say, don't fornicate. What does he say? He says, la taqrabu ila zina. Like, don't even come near to zina. Why? Because when you even come near to zina, it's those things that lead up to it. So for example, generally speaking, two people don't just meet each other in the middle of the street and start to fornicate. No, what happens? It starts out with a conversation, then it goes to a phone call, then it goes to a hand, a physical touch, and then it goes to more flirtation. And so basically, what we're saying is that it's a process that builds up, and at every level, you becoming more and more comfortable. And so what happens is that you're letting your guard down more and more. And so, that's why we would say, trying to make sure that this is kind of like nipped in the bud, um, uh, uh, completely. The Sunday sessions for Why Islam is True is going to be between an hour and a half and 2 hours. So it'll be more or less from about 10 a.m. till about 11:30, 12 o'clock, inshallah. And again, if people want to unmute themselves, they can. They don't necessarily have to write it in the chat. But you can feel free to write in the chat or unmute your microphones.
Salam alaikum. Can you hear me?
Walaikum salam to that. Yes, I can.
So I have kind of a dumb question. um, I was buying some vanilla extract today, and most vanilla extract contains alcohol. I've been going back and forth with this issue for as long as I've been Muslim. Some say it's not haram because when you cook with it, there's no effect. It disappears, and others say it is because even though it's there, it's still haram. So I mean, what specifically? I want to know what's the Hanafi position on this.
So the Hanafi position on this is one that is generally speaking considered to be a more lenient position. And if I'm if and um I'm like 95% sure, and I'm just gonna make sure I double check. But the Hanafi position is that a product that is not used for the sake of actual intoxication. So, uh, um, and then like there's two aspects in the Hanafi school. It's for one is that from the standpoint, one standpoint of the Hanafi school is that they consider khamr, which is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually made haram. They consider that if it's not from grapes or dates, then that is not necessarily going to be what is considered to be najis, what is going to be impermissible. So from that perspective, like the ethanol that they use in extracts and things like that, uh, as long as it's not made from grapes or dates, then it would be permissible to consume. Um, also, uh, there's another um, uh, uh, position within the Hanafi school where it mentions that non-wine alcohol is permitted for consumption if the following conditions do not apply. It is not in use with the intention of intoxication. It is not used in such an amount that it actually intoxicates. It is not used the way intoxicants are used, and is not used in vain. Um, and so that is the Hanafi position on it. However, if a person wanted to be more precautious in regards to it, for example, like in my household, we use alcohol-free vanilla extract. And so if a person wanted to be more precautions, then they can use some of the alcohol-free alternatives that they have in terms of vanilla extract. But the Hanafi position is generally speaking that on more than one level, using vanilla extract would be something that would be permissible, and Allah knows best.
Thank you. Now I can finally put this to rest.
No, but is there advice for letting go of anger with a family member who is using drugs and not Muslim, and how to responsibly support this family member if they're not currently interested in giving up drugs? So, from the aspect of the aspect of the question, one of the things to note is that oftentimes people who have an addiction, um, because for many of us, we have some type of addiction, no matter what it is that it's just that drugs themselves are often yeah, it's easier to see the negative effects of drugs. Whereas we don't necessarily see as prevalent the negative effects of other addictions that we have. So one of the things in relation to that is that, trying to come from a standpoint of empathy with a person who's struggling with addiction, because many people, when they're struggling with addiction, oftentimes what has happened is that there's some type of trauma or there's some type of hurt that they're utilizing the drugs to try to compensate for. And so, looking at it from the standpoint of this person is actually, sick and this person is actually ill, and they haven't been able to find a way of treating, whatever it is that's ailing them besides, turning to, drug use. Um, so, looking at it from like a different perspective, not necessarily from the standpoint of uh, the negative things that come along with drug use, looking at it from the standpoint of this person is in a state of not being well and in trying to be, in which leads uh, into the next aspect of just trying to be as supportive as possible within healthy limits, because drug use itself comes along with a lot of baggage. So for example, I work in a prison. So a large number of the incarcerated, they're incarcerated based upon some aspect of drug use, because drug use will often lead to issues with money, issues with robberies, issues with fornication, issues with health situations. There's just a lot of things that just associate itself with drug use and getting involved in drugs. And so you can, again, it's just something we can necessarily see the effects of it. So that's why I said from a healthy distance, trying to see whatever is best for that individual that you can possibly help with. And sometimes it's a situation of, um, for lack of a better way of putting it, showing tough love sometimes, meaning that you're still going to try to help them in whatever way possible, but you're not going to necessarily assist them in feeding into their addiction. Um, so the thing is that it's going to be different in different cases, and also depending on what the relationship is with this particular individual and so on and so forth. But it's a matter of not necessarily abandoning this person, so that even if the only thing that you're able to do for this person is just to make a sincere dua for this person, because depending on the nature of how long they've been using the drug, what type of drug it is, so on and so forth, is that it can be a very difficult situation, because when a person takes drugs, not only do you have that psychological dependency, but your body literally develops a physical chemical dependency such that if you try to stop, you'll get sick. And from what I've heard and what I've known of it in just in a general sense, is that it's a very physically painful sickness. Like it's like having like the worst type of flu that you can ever think of. And so, that is something that just in and of itself is a difficulty. So again, coming from the standpoint of trying to have empathy for this individual and just, in whatever capacity that you can help, trying to help them. And so hopefully that even if you're not able to get the individual to be able to come to a point of kicking the habit, but at least, helping yourself to remove any anger that you have from this individual. Because again, oftentimes for people who are on drugs, the shar, the evil that they may do, they're not necessarily doing it from the standpoint of really trying to hurt the people that they are around. It's just that their chemical dependency on this drug is such that they cannot make sound judgments. And so they may feel absolutely horrible about the things that they do, but the addictions and the life involved with drug use is just it's a very dangerous and toxic situation. I mean, just put it like this, is that, probably if not all of the people who are here today, many of us have probably seen someone who has, been struggling with addiction, and we can see how horrible they may look. I've seen, and like again, like I said, I work in a prison. I've seen individuals that their teeth are all rotted out. Their fingertips, are all orange because of the fire that they put close to their fingers when they're using the drugs. They look disheveled, they look horrible, but they are so dependent upon these drugs that they can't even, acknowledge how horrible it is that they look, so let alone, having full cognizance of, the effects that it's having on others around them. So, again, looking at it, I'm not trying uh to make excuses for people who are struggling with addiction, but still looking at it from the standpoint as now how America's looking at it, because it's now they're seeing the effects in the suburbs and whatnot. It's not just an inner city thing, but looking at it from now, the standpoint of how America's looking at it is that this is a health crisis. This is these people are oftentimes very ill, very sick, and their sickness is on different levels, oftentimes dealing with some type of trauma or some type of uh extreme hurt or something of that nature, and the drugs has just been a means of being able to try to cope with those situations, and Allah knows best. Did that help? Yeah, it's a very difficult situation. But again, oftentimes the people are in a very ill situation, and oftentimes the people themselves may very well want to quit, but it's a very hard thing to get over because, like I said, your body like physically develops a dependency such that if it doesn't get it, you can become physically ill. And like I said, it's just kind of like imagine the worst flu that you can think of, with vomiting, cold sweats, fever, so on and so forth, and just not being able to, uh, and just knowing that by taking the drugs that could be something that would actually relieve it. And so that's why I said it's a very difficult situation to be in. But at bare minimum, to make dua, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to bring them out of it if we're not able to necessarily assist them with any further assistance. Because again, you don't want to place yourself in harm's way because of the many negative things that come along with the drug life. Anything else on people's minds? Salam alaikum salam. We're now on day 11 of Shawwal. Is it normal that we still have the Ramadan blues? What's best practice, especially for new converts, now that there's no on-site places, 6 days fasting, makeup days, and daily Quran? So it's not abnormal to have, to miss Ramadan, and inshallah, that's a sign of Iman. We should miss Ramadan because there's many special blessings that are within the month of Ramadan. So it's nothing wrong with, missing month of Ramadan because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He opens up different things in the month of Ramadan that He doesn't necessarily open up other times. So for example, we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where the gates of paradise are open and the gates of hellfire are closed. So there's an extra sense of mercy that our deeds are multiplied during this time. So there's a lot of khair. There's a lot of good in the month of Ramadan. So there's nothing wrong with missing the month of Ramadan. However, just kind of was already mentioned within the question itself, is that we try to hold on to whatever it is that we can of Ramadan, even outside of Ramadan. So as was mentioned, one of the things the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to us is that during the month of Ramadan, if a person were to fast it, and then afterwards were to fast 6 days from the month of Shawwal, then inshallah it would be as if they have fasted the entire year. And so, trying to make sure that one does this. Now, the ulama or some of our teachers in the Yemen, what they would actually do is that the day after Eid, because it's not permissible to fast on the day of Eid. The day of Eid is one of the 5 days where it's actually haram, it's impermissible to fast. However, the day after Eid, those first 6 days after Eid, they would actually not go out and meet with one another, because they would just involve themselves in fasting those 6 days. And then after that, they would go out and they would meet with one another. And this is a way of encouraging one another to make sure that they fast the 6 days. And so there's not an obligation to do it that way, meaning that you do not have to fast the 6 days of Shawwal immediately after the Eid, nor does it necessarily even have to be consistent, meaning that you don't have to do it 6 days in a row. However, it's just this aspect of trying to hasten, trying to rush to do good. Because what you don't want to happen is that you keep putting it off and putting it off. One of the things they say is that the shaitan will allow you to make all the noble intentions that you want as long as it's for tomorrow. Meaning that, if you say, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, but you say, okay, but I'll start it tomorrow. It's just kind of like, for many of us with exercising, we have this grand idea that, okay, yeah, I'm going to start exercising again, or I'm going to, start an exercise regimen, so on and so forth. And we just, I'll start next Monday, or I'll start next Tuesday. And then when that time comes, well, I got busy this week. And so I'll start this, the next week. And so the shaitan, he'll allow you to make all the noble intentions that you want, as long as it's not today, as long as it's not now. And so this is this aspect of, uh, you know, rushing to do good. And then also as well is that what the ulama also say is that if you do it this way, you're coming off of the fast of Ramadan. And so your body and your schedule is already attuned to fasting. And the further you get away from Ramadan, the more that you start getting into the aspect of not being in the mode of fasting. And so for different people, fasting has different levels of difficulty. Some people fasting is very easy. Other people fasting is very difficult. And so the ulama, they recommend, trying to hasten to doing it such that you don't miss out on it. Because sometimes what will also happen is that you'll get to the point where you only have like 3 or 4 days of Shawwal left, and now you're saying, "Oh man, I don't have, there's not even enough days in Shawwal for me to fast the 6 days," and so now you miss out on it. Makeup days. Makeup days can be done anytime before the next coming Ramadan. But you want to make sure that you do them such that you don't forget. And you don't necessarily want to necessarily do them in a time where it's going to be difficult. So for example, if a person has a large amount of makeup days that they have to do, then you can take advantage of the winter months, so December, January, February. If you want to try to follow the prophetic sunnah, is that Aisha anha, she mentions that she used to wait until the month of Sha'ban to make up any missed fasts that she had. So if you wanted to fast in the month of Sha'ban, then you can do that. The month of Sha'ban is the month right before the month of Ramadan. So you can do that as well. So yes, Jazakallahu khairan. Uh, so you can do that as well if you wish to do it. But again, as long as you make it up before the next coming Ramadan, then that is sufficient. And then with a regular recitation of the Quran, a regular wird of Quran, this should be something that we should never let a day go by except that we're reading the Quran. Essentially, we want to come to is that we want to come to a point where every 30 days we finish the Quran, meaning that we don't let a month go by except that we've completed the recitation of the Quran in its entirety, in particular if we're people who know how to read the Arabic. If we're not a people that know how to read Arabic, then trying to at least listen to the recitation of the Quran, such that we're able to finish it within 30 days. And the reason why I'm saying to listen to it is because yes, you can read the Quran in English or whatever language you're most comfortable with, but it's not considered to be the actual Quran. That's considered to be a translation of the meanings of the Quran. There's a secret in even the way that the Quran is recited. And so if a person is not able to recite themselves, then at least to try to listen to someone. And then this way you can pace yourself because you can see how long it's going to take to listen to, however much of a portion of Quran that you want to. Oftentimes, one of the best times to try to do anything with the Quran is going to be at the Fajr time, either in the Tahajjud time before Fajr or in that time when Fajr actually comes in. But this is a beneficial time to engage with the Quran. Also, trying to, because this is all about keeping up with Ramadan, keeping up what we had in Ramadan, is that even after the month of Shawwal, is that the Prophet ﷺ, if I'm not mistaken, this is from Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu, where he said that my friend had advised me to fast at least 3 days out of every month, if I'm remembering the hadith correctly. So even out after Shawwal, having regular practices of fasting at least 3 days out of the month. And so at bare minimum, you could say that you can fast the 3 white days of every month, the 13th, 14th, and 15th of every lunar month. However, there are other days that are recommended to fast as well. So for example, we're going to soon be coming upon the month of Dhul Hijjah. So in the month of Dhul Hijjah, it's recommended to fast on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, which is the day of Arafah. And so there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that mentions about the forgiveness that a person will receive by fasting on the day of Arafah. But also it can should be recommended as well if a person were to fast the entirety of those first 9 days. So from the first of Dhul Hijjah all the way up until the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. So that is another recommendation. It's recommended to fast the 9th and the 10th of the month of Muharram. The month of Muharram is the month that comes right after Dhul Hijjah. It's also, if a person were so inclined, they can fast every Monday and Thursday. That is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, or a person can engage in the fast of Dawood alayhi salam, which is the fast of every other day. Um, uh, and so this is from the standpoint of keeping up in the aspect of fasting. And then from the standpoint of salat, from the standpoint of Ramadan, is that yes, we don't, we don't have, for example, Salat al-Tarawih outside of Ramadan, but we can still engage in supererogatory prayers, whether it be sunnahs that we haven't normatively performing, or even just supererogatory nawafil prayers that we just decide to pray out of our want to gain nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, if we haven't established a regular pattern of praying the rawatib, the emphasized sunnahs associated with the obligatory prayers, then making sure that we, engage in that. So the 2 sunnahs before Fajr, the 4 sunnahs before Dhuhr, the 2 sunnahs after Dhuhr, the 2 sunnahs after Maghrib, the 2 sunnahs after Isha, and then making sure that we pray the witr prayer. Also getting up for tahajjud, to pray at least 2 rakas in the middle of the night before Fajr comes in. Also, if we have not, established it, trying to establish praying Salatul Duha, which is the prayer that comes after the sun has risen, when it becomes permissible to pray again, and having done so before the sun reaches the zenith, reaches its highest point in the sky, which is going to be right before Dhuhr, establishing that. So, Ramadan, as some of our teachers would say, is really supposed to be a springboard for us. Is that we increase in our acts of worship in Ramadan, and we're trying to use that momentum to carry us forward to the next Ramadan. And so there's so many different things that we can do. And I'll end it by saying that even with the increase of trying to do good deeds, even if we don't necessarily increase in doing good deeds, then we can do what you can arguably say is even more beneficial, is that we can work on removing the evil deeds that we have. So the sinful activity that we have, working on removing that from our lives and removing the desire for those things in our lives. And so even if we don't necessarily fully increase in terms of the good deeds that we do, at least trying to work on removing the evil deeds that we do. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for ease. How do we keep up with our Quran reading and recitation from reading, not from memory, when menstruating? What is the proper way to go about it? Um, from the standpoint of, for example, the Maliki school of law, the Maliki school of law actually considers that a woman who is menstruating is actually still permitted to recite the Quran. They still would not, if I'm not mistaken, they still would not be able to touch the Quran, like directly with their hands. But like for example, if they had a pen or a pencil, something like that, that they turned the pages with, but they can still recite the Quran. Um, so if a sister wanted to do so, she could do that. Or what she can do is that, as I was mentioning before, is that she can listen to the Quran being recited while she's on her menstrual cycle, and Allah knows best. According to the Hanafi school, the Hanafi school is similar to the Shafi school, in which a woman on her menstrual cycle would not be permitted to recite the Quran. So in that case, for example, she might be able to listen to the Quran, but she would not be permitted to recite the Quran. Are you able to read silently without reciting? Um, I don't know. Um, I would have to, but I mean, I know you wouldn't be able to touch the Quran. So, for example, even if you were going to try to do so, you would have to, like use a pen or something like that to turn the pages. Because in the Hanafi school, like it's different than the Shafi school. For example, they even consider that a translation of the Quran that you would not be permitted to touch or carry if you're on your menstrual cycle or just in a state of janaba, period. So that would be something that uh, would have to be taken into consideration. But silently reading the Quran, I don't know. Uh, I would, uh, I would have to defer to uh, Ustadh Narad or Imam Kamal, who are more versed in the Hanafi method than I am. But, and actually, it is permitted. It is permitted to read the Quran without pronouncing the words, without reciting it. So yes, in the Hanafi school you can. So so just that quickly, I was able to get an answer to the question. So yes, in the Hanafi school you can read it silently without recitation. Why? Yeah. Did I miss anyone in the chat? Okay. I just want to make sure. YouTube comment. I hate my life. Um, SubhanAllah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy upon you. Um, One of the things to always keep in mind, especially as a believer, if a person is a Muslim, is that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Dunya sijnatul mu'min wa jannatul kafir." That the worldly life, this dunya, is the paradise of the disbeliever and it's the prison of the believer. And so this life is always going to be fraught with trials and tribulations. But again, uh, the only thing that we're asked to do is just to do our best to respond in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, we should never get to a point of despair because that only is something that the shaitan is trying to get us to. Because he knows that when a person comes to a state of despair, then for one, they're going into the realm of what is going to be considered to be a major sin. Um, when a person comes to a point of saying like, Allah will never forgive me or my life is so horrible, and they just kind of give up hope, that is actually considered to be a major sin in and of itself. Is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is so merciful towards His servants that He never wants them to be in a state where they feel that they can never receive His mercy. And it's also a situation where a person would really want to kind of do an assessment of their life. And in particular, because, a general statement like, I hate my life, there's so many different implications that can take. But one of the things that we can consider, and especially in our times today, is that what is our relationship to social media and other forms of virtual reality, because we're having situations where things like depression and anxiety are increasing with the increase of social media use. And part of the reason why that is because we see others and kind of like the highlights of their life. And so it seems like, their lives are so great and my life is so miserable. Whereas what we don't see is the realities that's going behind all those things. So when people post on social media, and they actually have done research, it's particularly with young women, an author by the name of Leonard Sachs, he has a book called Girls Adrift. Excuse me, no, it's Boys Adrift and Girls on the Edge. And part of what he mentions in that book is the negative effect that social media has on young women. And the example that he gives is that for many young women, when they post on social media, they only post about good things. They only post about those things that are happy moments. And so when other young women see the post of their social media friends and they see all these happy moments, they start to feel like, everyone else is having a great time and I have all these trials and tribulations in my life. Where the reality of it is that you have no idea what that person is going through outside of those, snapshots of, a good time that they may be having at that moment. And so, but because that is our perception, it leads to a sense of despair uh and anxiety and depression, because we just feel that everyone else is having a great time and I'm having all these issues. When in actuality, and this is just from the fakir's position Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed him in certain situations, is that one of the things I've come to realize is that everyone has issues. Everyone has problems. A person's problems may not be as manifest as others, but everyone has things that they're dealing with. I've seen, and I've talked to all different types of people throughout the years. Um, uh, uh, and I've heard people, people that you outwardly it seems like everything is great for them, but you talk to them and they're going through all different types of um, issues and hardships. And so it's one of those situations where uh, if that is what is contributing, like if you find yourself, highly uh, highly addicted to social media and things of that nature, then one of the things I would say is to unplug, get off of it and um, really just, try to do things in your life um, that will first and foremost increase you in your connection with the law, and then also try to be more physically social as much as possible, uh, given whatever capacities that you have. The uh, mm, internet friends are not the same as physical friends. Is it permissible to recite morning and evening adhkar while menstruating in Hanafi school, or do you also need to recite silently? Generally speaking, adhkar, you know, dhikr, supplications, you don't need to be in a state of purity in order to do so. So inshallah, it would be no problem with doing that. Like even some of my teachers, what they recommend is that when a woman is on her menstrual cycle, is that even though she's not permitted to pray during that time, they actually, some of my teachers, what they recommend is that during the salat times, that she goes and she sits and she does some type of dhikr during those times. So that even though she's not permitted to actually do the formal salat, but she still is recognizing the sanctity of the waqt, the sanctity of the time. So that she's not doing the formal prayer, but she's still doing a dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during that time. So generally speaking, different dhikrs and adhkars do not require a person to be in a state of tahara. And Allah knows best. Anything else on other people's minds? Okay. How was everyone's Eid? Anyone do anything exciting for Eid? Washington Square Park. Is that where NYU had their Eid? Was that the NYU Eid? Alhamdulillah. How was that? Didn't they also have like a brunch afterwards? MashaAllah. How many people were there? Alhamdulillah. May Allah accept. Did everyone else just go to Washington Square Park? Oh, there's a question I was actually put in the chat about birthdays, how to approach them. Depends who you ask. I have a teacher who's very conservative, and he would say, absolutely, don't worry about acknowledging your birthday. uh, in particular, not to build up the nafs, especially in young children. Um, However, as you mentioned, is that children, it's not as if they're blind to the world. They'll see other kids and things of that nature. So the thing is that if you're going to take a position where you don't want to necessarily expose your children to the cultural norm of birthdays. Now, the thing is that is birthdays necessarily shirk? Not necessarily. Uh, I mean, some will uh, say that some of its origins have origins that are not Islamically sound, so to speak. Like part of one of the aspects of the concept of birthdays is that uh, it was kind of like a celebration of beating the odds, meaning that you survived another year, so you were celebrating that you were still alive for another year, uh, because it was in earlier times, people may not have had access to some of the things that we have now that help to keep people alive. And so, like, cheating death was a cause for people to want to celebrate. And then there's different cultural things that were placed into it, so this concept of like having a cake and getting gifts and so on and so forth. Uh, but again, it's really just going to be a situation of who you ask. But if you're going to be in a situation where you're not going to do birthdays, and I would say that you want to compensate for that by other things. And so you would compensate for that by, for example, following the prophetic sunnah is that you just, have a regular instance of giving gifts to people. And so and particularly your children. So you don't necessarily have any specific day that you necessarily do it, but that you give them gifts, for nothing more than trying to follow the sunnah of giving gifts to those whom you love and those who are close to you. Um, Also, making the Eid, making the two Eids, a special time that, your children receive gifts and all of this that you associate with them, love and of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that they don't have this sense of like they've been cheated out of things that their friends are uh or other people around them are receiving. So it's not the easiest of balances in living in America. So if you are going to take the position that you're not necessarily going to do birthdays formally, then just trying to make it a situation where you compensate for that, because again, children are not blind. They see what's going on in movies and TV, with their friends and in school and so on and so forth. So you want to make sure that they don't kind of have this resentment, and then they associate that resentment with Islam, and Allah knows best. um um Sister Emily, um would it be okay if your question, I address it after we take a break? Maghrib has come in here in New Jersey. I'm not sure where you are, but here in New Jersey, Maghrib has come in. So would it be okay if we make your question the first one that we look at once I finish praying Salat al-Maghrib? Are you going to still be with us? It shouldn't be more than 10 minutes. Oh, I think we lost her even beforehand. Okay. Sister Emily, are you with us? I was asking if it'll be okay if we make your question the first question we ask after we come back from the break, because I have to break to pray Maghrib. So I just want to make sure that you're going to still be with us. We'll take about a 7, 8 minute break for Salat Maghrib, and then your question will be the first one that I look at when we come back, inshallah. So we'll take about 7, 8 minute break, more or less right around 8 o'clock. We'll come back, inshallah ta'ala, for those of us on the East Coast that have to pray Salat Maghrib. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. الحمد لله. So, inshallah ta'ala, for those who may have stopped to pray as well, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our prayers. Taqabbalallah minna wa minkum. So the question I was placed is how to distance myself from non-Muslim friends I used to be close with in a way that is respectful / not displeasing to Allah. Obviously, it's fine to have non-Muslim friends, but I do not want bad influences in my life, and I'm responsible for my boundaries. They are not mean / bad people that intentionally harm me, but I'm ready to part ways. Um, I would probably say in many situations, you can just kind of like, as they might say in other situations, like you can just let nature take its course, so to speak, meaning that uh, I can give myself as an example. When I was in high school, I won my school in the yearbook. They had a superlative page where they would put like nicest eyes, best dress, and so on and so forth. Me and a friend of mine, we won best friends. Um, uh, uh, just that was how close we were in high school. So after high school, um, we I went to school in Georgia and he stayed here in New Jersey. And I eventually became more um, grounded in terms of my Islam and started to learn more about Islam. And so eventually what happened is that there was basically kind of a uh, gradual separation between the two of us just because the things that he would be doing would be things that I wouldn't consider doing. And the things that I was doing were things that he wasn't necessarily interested in to do. And so it was just like a gradual separation between us. But it didn't have a situation of there being any malice or anything like that between us. It's just that because essentially with friends, what is it that generally speaking brings us together with friends is shared interest. And so when you're in a situation where those interests are not necessarily shared, then there just will naturally be kind of like a gradual separation. And so again, so it's not as if we ended on bad terms. It's just that we had come to a point in our lives where our lives were not necessarily going in the same direction. So, uh, uh so I would say that that will probably kind of like be the natural course of things, is that as you try to be in different circles, different gatherings of Muslims, and you're not going to be going to places that are necessarily going to be the haram, meaning impermissible to go to, is that it's just going to be kind of like a natural gradual separation. And so in this way you don't necessarily have to worry about uh uh their being disrespectful or anything of that nature. It's just that we can keep up good relationships with them. It's just that your uh that shared uh common interest is just not necessarily going to be the same as it was prior to being Muslim. And so that would be kind of like my general advice. And again, this is not necessarily just about me. So if anyone else has advice or wants to, mention something, please feel free. Anything else on anyone's mind? Anyone else do anything different for Eid other than Washington Square Park? No one? Everyone was at Washington Square Park? I guess I was the only one out there then. It's all good. I'm not really a big New York person. So New York is just not my scene. Alhamdulillah, visiting friends and family is one of the sunnahs. So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed you to fulfill that sunnah of visiting people on Eid. Milky Eid. MashaAllah, may Allah make it easy for you and your family. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Friend invited me to eat with her family and I pray with them in the Bronx. So is everyone from New York besides me? Great Guyana and food and amazing nap, mashallah. Yeah, I don't think I took a nap on Eid and I wish I would have been able to. It would have been nice. I think maybe only two of us are not from New York. How many days are the Eid? Um, the Eid for Eid al-Fitr is more or less just the one day. And even for Eid al-Adha, it's more or less the one day. But after Eid al-Adha, you have the Ayyam Tashriq, the 3 days that come after Eid al-Adha, and those are also days where it's impermissible to fast. So, sometimes you'll hear people say that, the Eid is 3 days, and so on and so forth, but the actual Eid in terms of like the celebration where it's impermissible to fast and that, that's the day of celebration is actually just one day. Um, uh, but like I said, like for example, with Eid al-Adha, you have the day of Eid, and then you also have the Ayyam al-Tashriq, the three days that come right after Eid al-Adha, and those are also the days that it's impermissible to fast as well. Um, so that makes up the 5 days where it's impermissible to fast: Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha, and the 3 days of Ayyam al-Tashriq. So for example, I'm alone in my house besides the cats because my wife and my son, they went to a Eid something that they had here in New Jersey. Like this, I think the city of Edison had put together something for the Muslims in one of the parks. And so my wife and my son are there. They had asked if I was going to go, but I said, no, I'm going somewhere else. And what that meant was I'm going to my bed and taking a nap. So they went and left me here by myself with the cats. And off the current topic question, what are the rulings of women staying single and not getting married? I have family members who are not married, living a single life. The mahram, fathers, etc., passing away. Are they allowed to just continue living single? So the ulama, they generally speaking, they say that any action that a person takes can be placed into one of five categories. That it can either be an obligation, a recommendation, permissibility, disliked, or haram. And so with marriage, generally speaking, they say that depending on the person, it'll fall into one of those five categories. The general generic default position on marriage is that it's recommended. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that, marriage is my sunnah, and so he encouraged people to get married and to have children. However, the scholars have mentioned that that's kind of like the general default position, but for individual people, the the ruling will fall into one of five categories. So they give examples, like for example, they say from the standpoint of obligation, that they would say that it would be an obligation for a person to get married if they were in a position where they were capable of getting married, meaning that they were able to give their spouse their rights, and they are in a situation that if they don't get married, they are likely or will fall into sin. So if a person's in a situation where they are likely or they know that they're going to fall into sin, but they are capable of getting married, meaning that they can get married and they can give their spouse their rights, then for that person, it's an obligation for them to get married to protect their deen. In terms of recommendation, we already mentioned that the general default is considered to be that of recommendation. So this is the person who doesn't necessarily fear um, falling into sin by not being married, but they're able to give a person their rights in terms of marriage, and they have an inclination towards marriage. So for that person, it's recommended for them to get married. And in terms of permissibility, this is a person who has the capacity to get married, meaning that they can give a person their rights as a spouse, but they don't necessarily have an inclination towards getting married. So they don't really have a desire to get married, but they are capable of giving a person their rights. So that for that person, it's permissible for them to get married. In terms of it being makruh, then this is a person who they fear that they may not be able to give a person their rights. That, is not necessarily a guarantee, but, they know that there are certain things about them that they may harm their spouse if they were to get married. For that person, it could be considered to be makruh. And for the person that is haram for, this is the person where they know definitely that they would harm their spouse if they were to get married. Like, if they know that they're going to do things that are impermissible, then for that person, it's going to be considered to be haram for them to get married. And so, uh, again, the generic ruling is that it's recommended for Muslims to get married, but depending on the individual, it can go into one of the five categories that the ulama say that all actions can fall under. And even then, it can get more technical than that, but I think that's sufficient. So yeah, so if you have family members who are single, then if they decide that they want to remain single for the rest of their lives, technically speaking, they can. For example, Imam Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he never got married. Uh, Also, for example, uh, Rabi'at Adawiyah, the great uh, uh, female sheikha, she never got married. So, it's permissible for a person not to get married, but it's not considered to be the sunnah. The sunnah is to get married. Anything else on anyone's mind? Seems like every so often we have a Living Islam gathering when we're more uh, we're more quiet than other times. And then sometimes we'll have a Living Islam gathering where it seems like we have too many questions that we can't necessarily get to everyone's in the 2 hours that we do it. So alhamdulillah. Is there an Islamic way to heal from our traumas, including therapy? Um, yes, there definitely is. Um, uh, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions very clearly in the Quran, He says, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. That is it not except by the remembrance of Allah that hearts find rest, that hearts find peace and tranquility. And so, what are traumas? Traumas, generally speaking, are situations in our lives that trigger a negative emotional response. Um, and so, uh, really, we have to look at what those traumas are, and then looking at the best means of trying to address those situations. And so, because the nature of traumas is that they're going to be so variable for different people, that we have to look at an individual basis. But at the heart of it is going to be trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the reality of the situation is that anything that we go through in life is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed us in. That there's nothing that happens in this life except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed us in. So as the saying would go, the one that brought you to it can get you through it. And so, at the heart of the matter is turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from a spiritual aspect. And this is one of the things that Imam Fode Drame, mentions about the concepts of like therapy, whether it be mental health therapy or even physical therapy, is that you're only addressing one third of a human being. So it's not to say that, for example, a Muslim cannot necessarily go to a therapist. However, that should not be the end of the story, so to speak, because if I'm just only addressing my mental faculty, but I haven't addressed my ruh, I haven't addressed my soul, then I'm still going to, have things that I'm going to be struggling with. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at it from a holistic perspective, so that I'm addressing the mental as well as the physical as well as the spiritual. And so this is the Islamic approach, is that you address the entirety of the human being. So at the heart of the matter is making sure that our hearts are connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because ultimately, it's only through that that you're really going to be able to overcome any traumas or any anxieties that you have. But it's just to say that we don't negate the other, aspects of the sunnah of the dunya. So for example, from the basis of our aqidah, we know we should come to an understanding to know that, for example, physical medicine does not do anything in and of itself. It's just that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's allowed for that to be a regular association that we have, is that if we take a physical medicine, then we receive possibly healing. But we don't negate the aspect of taking the physical medicine. We still take the physical medicine, but we understand that the results of us taking that physical medicine, the effect that we are looking for, is something that only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, again, the aspect of it being is that from an Islamic standpoint, that we want to address the entirety of our being. And so if we need to go to a mental health therapist, for example, then ideally trying to go to a Muslim a mental health therapist, so that they at least have a basic understanding of the importance of having a connection to Allah subhanahu. Because the thing is that, like, for example, some therapists will tell you to do un-Islamic things. Like, for example, some people, if they've had trauma that has revolved around the religion, then some therapists will, possibly tell you, oh, well, just, don't be as religious, like, so, leave off the prayer, or, some, thing like that. So, you know, uh, it's a situation where you can't necessarily just like defaultly um, just go from the standpoint of like of mental therapist. But again, it's the aspect of having a holistic situation where you're addressing the mental, the physical, and the spiritual. Uh, because if one of those three faculties are off, then it's kind of like uh you're gonna be, deficient by a third or two-thirds of yourself. And so how could you ever truly feel whole? People say that all your past sins are forgiven once you take your shahada. Is it wrong to ask for forgiveness for things you used to do before you took your shahada when you think about them? Also, is there hadith or ayat that explains this thing that people say? So uh, just as a clarification, when we say that your previous sins are forgiven, yes, we have a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, where he had mentioned to one of the Sahaba that Islam erases what comes before it. However, that does not um, negate the responsibility that we have for the wrongs that we may have committed towards other people. So if we've committed a sin against another person, us becoming Muslim does not remove the responsibility that we have of addressing the wrong that we've done to that person. So, for example, if I stole from someone prior to becoming Muslim, I still have to address the matter of me stealing from that person. Meaning, for example, I have to give them back what I stole from them, or I have to give them the monetary equivalent of what I stole from them, so on and so forth. And so, um, uh, and so, um, if you have committed a sin prior to becoming Muslim and now you've become Muslim, it's not necessarily wrong to ask for forgiveness for that, but you should have a good opinion of your Lord. We would say in Arabic, husna dan billah, having a good opinion of Allah, that He has already forgiven you. But it's a sign of iman that when one thinks about their past and there may be sinful activity that's taken place in the past, that they're not pleased with it. And whether they were Muslim or not Muslim at the time, that's a sign of iman that a person should not be pleased with acts of disobedience towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but still at the same time having a good opinion of Allah that He has already forgiven you for that. And again, we have confirmation of this from the Messenger of Allah, that for the person that enters into Islam, all of his previous sins are forgiven. So, inshallah, a person should have glad tidings, should have a sense uh, of feeling good that inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already forgiven them, and Allah knows best. طيب. So, inshallah, if there's um, no other discussions, then inshallah we will stop here for tonight. Jazakallahu khairan for all of you for being with us. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep you in His care. And so please keep us in your du'as, inshallah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again accept all of your ibadah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow for you to continue in your ibadah all the way up into the next coming Ramadan. Bifnillah. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الله سبحانه وتعالى أعلم وهو حسبنا ونعم الوكيل. السلام عليكم.